and she was born in Byron, California, on a large ranch where she was the 9th of 12 children. Her father was a prosperous and well-respected rancher and raised sheep, and at one time they had 6,000 sheep. They also raised livestock, alfalfa, pears, and grapes, according to his obituary. Charles L. Prichard was a hired hand on the ranch, his job breaking horses, so the family history says. They were married, and Emma was 21 and Charles was 27 in November of 1891. Emma would occasionally talk to me about her growing up years, but very little. She remembered shelling peas, a wash tub full, for dinner for the family and the hired hands. It was important in her family that everyone be ready for church on Sunday, and they needed to get on the horse and buggy in time. And one day she stubbed her toe. It really hurt, and she had to run out to the buggy anyway. She did not talk about her married life or about her raising 2 sons. They moved around the country and had 5 different homes in 23 years. The oldest son, Herschel, was born in 1894 in Hanford, California, and the second son, Lloyd, was born in 1900 in Chico, California. They were in Bremerton, Washington from 1902 to 1907, where Charles managed a hardware store owned by his brother Albert. In 1910, they were in Kalama, Washington. About 1912 to 1915, they were in Dallas, Oregon. It must have been difficult to start over in a new community so often. She was married 23 years and was a widow at age 45. Charles died after surgery for gallstones in 1915 in Dallas, Oregon, where his obituary said he was one of Dallas's most prominent real estate men, and that he came to Dallas several years ago and by hard labor and honest dealings had just worked up a good business. After Charles' death, she returned to Bremerton where she had friends to support herself and her son Lloyd, who was 14. She and a friend had a tea shop in Bremerton. I believe she also did child care. I don't know if Charles left her money. He sold insurance, so maybe she had some money. Her son Herschel and his wife Lita and 2 daughters also lived in Bremerton. When Charles' brother Albert died in 1924 in Seattle, he and his wife Mary had no children, so I am guessing that Albert willed the house on 942 20th Avenue in Seattle to Emma. Herschel and Lita lived on the first floor with their daughters Charlotte and Phyllis. Lloyd and Grace and children and Emma lived on the second floor. Lloyd was working at the Navy shipyard in Bremerton, and in 1932, Lloyd, Grace, children, and Emma moved to Bremerton. I remember Grandma Emma as being kind to me and my spending time with her. She taught me how to clean and cut up a chicken. When I was a teenager, I set her hair in curlers at night and I combed it for her the next day. I asked her how she could sleep with curlers, and she said you had to suffer to be beautiful. It was important for her to look nice. She was too proud to pick up her old age pension checks, so my mother did it for her. I remember her love for tamales, which she could get at the butcher shop in Bremerton. That's when I developed a liking for tamales. She would also get pomegranates and persimmons, which were California fruits that she must have remembered from childhood. Her relationship with Mom, I know, was strained. Emma knew how things were supposed to be, and I think made it clear to Mom how they should be, and her way was the right way. Her reputation was one of being difficult. My brother Chuck told me he remembered Emma making Mom cry. My cousin Phyllis told me that when Grandma Emma came to their house for her annual one-week visit, she just waited for the fights to start between Emma and her mother, Lita. One day, I talked to Mom about rearranging the silverware in the drawer, which seemed to me a lot easier. And she said, Grandma likes it this way, so we'll leave it that way. My mother was the kindest and most loving person I ever knew. She would help anybody in need and often did. So I think Emma must have been pretty set in her ways and difficult to deal with. She was not averse to telling me and my brothers what to do. I was very compliant child and don't remember crossing her. As she got older, in the evening after dinner, she would sit in the rocking chair with her newspaper on and an apple and a knife on her lap. And she would doze off, and when I was often alone with her, I worried she might be dead, and what was I supposed to do? I never told Mom and Dad about my fears. As she aged, her health went downhill, and she became mostly bedridden in her last few weeks. She died in July 14th, 1944, at age 73. In later years, when I thought about Grandma, I think I was assigned to her early on in our family. This is about my dad. When I was a child, I remember feeling afraid of Dad because he would get angry at my brothers or some other irritant, and he had a loud voice and a very angry face, along with some cuss words. He never yelled or cussed at me, but I could read his face, which told me I had done something or said something that did not meet with his approval. I think being shy and not wanting to disappoint Dad, I did not talk much. I remember the day I quit being afraid of him. I was about 14 years old. He was working on the duplex he had built about a quarter mile from our house, and my mother asked me to tell my dad lunch was ready. When I saw him on the roof of the building, he looked very tired. And at that moment, I allowed him to be human. He and I would go for walks in the woods. We talked about things we saw. I remember one day seeing dogtooth violets. They were so pretty and yellow. He said we didn't pick these flowers because they were rare. He traveled often for his job in the Navy Yard, and when he came home, he talked about the places in the country he had been, talked about the geography and the people and the places he had seen. We would look at maps of the area, trace his travels. He collected menus for me when he ate at restaurants. I had quite a collection. I think my dad was very bright. He read a lot. He asked about what I was reading in school, and we read some things together. He was not able to finish high school because his mother was widowed when he was 14. So at age 16, he had a job in the Navy Yard as a messenger boy on a temporary assignment. He later went to the shipfitter shop and 46 years later retired, having the top civilian job in the Navy Yard, chief planner and estimator. His mother lived with us, and he was very protective of her. She had a reputation of being very difficult to get along with, which caused friction in the house. I spent time with her, and later in my life, I felt like I had been assigned to her. She was always good to me. When she died, my dad hugged me and said, "We will miss Grandma, won't we?" I sometimes wondered why I got along with her and so many others did not. After I was married, we saw less of my parents, but visited on all holidays that I wasn't working. I felt I could always count on my mom and dad for advice and help when I needed it. I was fortunate to have loving parents. When I was 5 and a half, we moved to Bremerton, and that was May 1932. And there was some talk about us just going for the summer, but we never left. Our house, Mr. Stoneman, our neighbor, built for a chicken house. Grandma and I slept in a tent in the backyard, I understand, but I don't remember that. At the bottom of the hill that led up to our front door, there was a skid road, an old skid road from lumbering days, where the kids tripped up running across it, lots of skinned knees. I don't remember getting water. I remember 2 rooms, a kitchen and a table with chairs and some boxes to sit on. There was a living room, and the front door was the land was level, but a path up to there was a hill. Directly up the hill from the front door was the outhouse. It seemed quite a ways to me, but probably wasn't that far. Just inside the front door was the wood stove where Mother cooked, I think, what heated the house. Dad chopped down trees for firewood after working all day. I don't remember how long we were there. Dad built our house on the adjoining land. And I remember from there the long clothesline that went from the back porch to a big tree for drying clothes. There was a washing machine on the back enclosed porch and a wringer you turned by hand. Mother ironed with 2 black irons that had a clip and a handle on them. So while one was heating, the other one you ironed with. We had a kitchen and a small bedroom off the kitchen that was Grandma's room. The living room and a bedroom where we kids slept in bunk beds. The bathroom off the bedroom, so we had indoor plumbing. I remember baths in a big wash tub. We had no electricity at first, so we used kerosene lamps. I remember Grandma cleaning the chimneys of the lamps at night. When I was 8 or 9, I had eczema on my hands, and I remember the teacher at school looking at everybody's hands and arms, and I felt very anxious that she would send me home. I think they were looking for scabies, which was contagious. Mom took me to the doctor, and among other things, he ordered potassium permanganate soaks, which I did every evening, and they turned my hands first purple and then brown. The night Dad hooked up to electricity was a big deal. All the kids asleep except Brother Jim, who got to see the lights first. I remember having 3 younger brothers when we were all very close together, so we did a lot of things together. I was the only girl, so I did different things sometimes, and I remember having so much fun with brothers, Chuck and Jim and Ted, and we did a lot of laughing and a lot of playing around. I remember doing the dishes, and Jim jumping up first at the table and saying, "I dibs to clear off," until he got to go fast and get outside to play, because play was important. And so then I would wash, and one of the brothers had to dry. So I remember standing on the porch and yelling at somebody to come and dry the dishes, as they were all outside having a good time. I don't know. Chuck really was a hard worker, and he would do a lot of things. And I remember one time he decided that we all needed some religion, so he had us have a little party with all the neighbor kids, and we talked about religion and read some of the Bible. That didn't last too long, however. Later on, Chuck said I used to be religious until I wised up. I remember how we got our dogs and our cats. We walked home from school 3 miles, so we had a lot of neighbors to pass by. And Jim was given a cat one time, and he brought that cat home, and we had her for a long time. And Jim told me that he thought he had a cold all his life till he realized he was allergic to cats. And then one time, Ted picked up a little dog, a little white dog, and he said the name was Docky, and brought that dog home. We had her till she was about 18 or 20, I think. And then one day we got Brownie. He came by the house and somebody had dropped him off, and he had a gunshot wound in his side. And Chuck picked him up, and the dog never left. The first day we had the dog, he was on the porch with Chuck, and he wouldn't let my dad come in the house after he got home from work. So that didn't make him very popular with my dad. And Dad said, "I've got a deal with the dog. He doesn't come to my house and I don't go to his." There were times when we climbed up the mountain that was behind us to get up on the top of the hill, and part of the way up we had to climb up the face of a waterfall, and we used the roots coming out of rocks to hang on to, and it wasn't very easy, but it was a challenge. When we got up to the top of the hill, it was open area where it had been logged off, and there was an old cat that they had used for logging up there that we could play on. One time we stayed there until it got too dark, and when we got into the woods to come back, we couldn't see anymore. So one of the older neighbor boys went down and got the dad to come up with the flashlight so we could see how to get down past the waterfall and go home. We learned a lesson that day. When I was 13 years old, Dad came home one day and said, "You get to be flower girl for the christening of 2 ships in the Navy Yard." So that meant we had to go shopping, and my mother and I went to Seattle, and we looked and looked for the right dress and the right shoes and the right hat to wear. We had a big white hat with a brim. The day we had the christening, we went and stood with the 2 ladies who were officers' wives and were the person that did the commissioning of using the champagne bottle. The first lady, we stood and had pictures first, and the other flower girl and I each had big bouquet of roses to hold. We went to the first ship, and I remember it was Mrs. Kimball, as she was one of the admiral's wives, and she hit that bow about 6 times before the champagne bottle broke. So when it was our turn to go up, I went with my sponsor, and she hit it really hard, and everybody got a little champagne. The ships were the Biscayne and the Barnegat. And I remember after the christening, we went to the back of the ship, and up when they did the first watch on the ship, and they had a whistle that blew that said what the first watch was supposed to be. That was very stirring to me. And afterwards, we had a really nice luncheon in the officers' club, and then they sent me a little bracelet afterwards, which was fun. It was a wonderful experience and very elegant.